If you're enjoying this tale of the Old West, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories from the frontier. Your support helps us bring these legendary tales to life every week. The sun hung low over the desolate plains of New Mexico Territory, casting long shadows across the cracked earth. A lone wagon creaked along the dusty trail, its wooden wheels grinding against stones and dried mud. Inside sat Martha Henderson, a woman of 32 with weathered hands and eyes that held both determination and fear. Her 3 children huddled beside her on the wooden bench. Tommy, barely 8 years old, clutched a worn wooden horse his father had carved before the fever took him. Little Sarah, just 5, pressed against her mother's side, her blonde curls damp with sweat from the merciless heat. The youngest, baby Emma, slept fitfully in Martha's arms, despite the wagon's constant jolting. The child had been born just 2 months after her father's death, and Martha often wondered if the little one would ever know the security of a father's protection in this harsh land. Martha's husband had been a good man, a farmer who tried to make an honest living from the unforgiving soil. But when the drought came and the crops failed, he'd taken work at the silver mine 30 miles north. The mine collapse that killed him and 7 other men had left their families with nothing but debt and desperation. Now Martha was heading west to California, where her sister had written of opportunities in the growing towns. She had sold everything they owned except the wagon, 2 horses, and the few belongings they could carry. The journey would take weeks, maybe months, through territory known for its dangers. The landscape around them stretched endlessly in all directions. Jagged mesas rose from the desert floor like ancient monuments, their red rock faces glowing in the afternoon sun. Sagebrush and thorny mesquite dotted the terrain, providing precious little shade for any traveler foolish enough to venture into this wasteland. As the wagon rolled on, Martha noticed vultures circling high overhead. The sight made her stomach clench with worry. In this country, where death lurked behind every rock and around every bend, vultures were never a good sign. She urged the horses forward, hoping to put distance between her family and whatever had attracted the scavengers. The trail ahead disappeared into a narrow canyon between 2 towering rock formations. Martha hesitated, knowing that such places were perfect for ambushes. But the main road led through here, and going around would add days to their journey. They were already running low on water and food. She guided the horses into the canyon, the clip-clop of their hooves echoing off the stone walls. The temperature dropped noticeably in the shade, providing blessed relief from the desert heat. But Martha couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched from the shadows above. Suddenly, a rifle shot cracked through the air, the sound bouncing off the canyon walls like thunder. Martha's horses reared in terror, nearly overturning the wagon. Tommy screamed, and Sarah began to cry as baby Emma woke with a start, adding her wails to the chaos. "Hold it right there, lady!" a gruff voice called from somewhere ahead. Martha looked up to see 5 men emerging from behind boulders, their faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats and dirty bandanas. Each carried a rifle or pistol, and their clothes were dusty and worn from life on the trail. The leader was a tall, lean man with cruel eyes and a scar running from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. His name was Jake Morrison, though most folks knew him as Scar Jake. He'd been terrorizing travelers along this route for months, taking whatever he pleased and leaving behind only fear and empty graves. "Well, well," Scar Jake said, his voice carrying a mocking tone. "What have we got here? A pretty little widow and her young'uns, traveling all alone through dangerous country. That ain't very smart, ma'am. Not smart at all." Martha's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "Please, we don't have much. Just let us pass, and we won't cause any trouble." The bandits laughed, a sound that echoed ominously through the canyon. One of them, a short, stocky man with missing teeth, stepped closer to the wagon. "Don't have much," she says. "We'll be the judge of that, won't we, boys?" "Check the wagon, Stumpy," Scar Jake ordered. "See what treasures our visitors are carrying." As Stumpy began rifling through their meager possessions, Martha pulled her children closer. She could feel Tommy trembling beside her, trying to be brave like his father had taught him. Sarah buried her face in her mother's skirts while baby Emma continued to cry. "Look here, boss," Stumpy called out, holding up a small leather pouch. "Looks like they got themselves a bit of traveling money." Martha's heart sank. That pouch contained the last of their savings, barely enough to buy supplies for the rest of their journey. Without it, they would never make it to California. "That's everything we have," Martha pleaded. "Please, my children need food and water to survive the journey." Scar Jake approached the wagon, his boots crunching on the rocky ground. "Well, now that's too bad, ain't it? Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to travel through our territory without paying the proper toll." The other bandits spread out around the wagon, cutting off any chance of escape. Martha recognized the look in their eyes, the same look she'd seen in the eyes of wolves when they cornered prey. These men had moved beyond simple robbery. They were planning something much worse. "Tell you what, lady," Scar Jake said, reaching up to touch Martha's arm. "Maybe we can work out some kind of arrangement. You look like you might be worth more than whatever's in that little pouch of yours." Martha jerked away from his touch, her maternal instincts flaring. "Don't you dare touch me or my children." The threat in her voice only seemed to amuse the bandits. "She's got some fire in her, boys. I like that in a woman. Makes things more interesting." Just then, the sound of hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. All eyes turned toward the narrow entrance, where a lone rider appeared on a magnificent black stallion. The man sat tall in the saddle, his long coat flowing behind him like a dark cape. Even from a distance, there was something commanding about his presence. "Well, I'll be damned," one of the bandits muttered. "Who's this fool riding into our party?" As the rider drew closer, Martha could see that he was a man of perhaps 40 years, with steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes. His face was weathered by years under the desert sun, and a thick mustache covered his upper lip. He wore a black hat pulled low over his brow, and twin Colt .45s hung at his sides. The stranger reined in his horse about 50 yards from the wagon and surveyed the scene with calm, calculating eyes. There was something about his stillness that made even the hardened bandits shift nervously. "Afternoon, gentlemen," the stranger said, his voice carrying easily through the canyon air. "Appears you've got yourselves a situation here." Scar Jake stepped forward, his rifle raised. "Nothing that concerns you, mister. Best you turn around and ride on out of here before you get hurt." The stranger's lips curved in what might have been a smile, though there was no warmth in it. "Now, that's interesting advice coming from a man who's about to make a very big mistake." "And what mistake would that be?" Scar Jake asked, his voice turning dangerous. "The mistake of thinking you can threaten a woman and her children while I'm around to do something about it." The bandits exchanged glances, unsure how to respond to this unexpected challenge. They outnumbered the stranger 5-1, but something about his quiet confidence made them hesitate. "You got a name, stranger?" Scar Jake asked. "Name's Cole Garrett." "Doom." The response sent a visible shiver through the group of bandits. Even Martha had heard whispers of that name around campfires and in saloons. Cole Garrett was a legend, a gunfighter whose reputation stretched from Texas to California. "The Cole Garrett?" Stumpy asked, his voice cracking slightly. "The one who faced down the Dalton gang single-handed?" Cole's expression didn't change. "Among other things." Martha felt a flicker of hope. If even half the stories about Cole Garrett were true, he might be their salvation. But she also knew that his reputation came with a price. He was wanted by the law in 3 territories for crimes ranging from bank robbery to murder. Scar Jake's confidence faltered, but he was too committed to back down now. "Don't matter who you are, Garrett. There's 5 of us and 1 of you. Those ain't good odds, even for a man with your reputation." Cole dismounted slowly, his movements fluid and deliberate. "Funny thing about odds," he said, checking his pistols with practiced ease. "They tend to change real quick when you know what you're doing." The tension in the canyon grew thick as molasses. Martha could feel the violence building like a thunderstorm on the horizon. She pulled her children closer, trying to shield them from what was about to happen. "Boys," Cole said, his voice carrying a note of finality, "you've got about 10 seconds to mount up and ride out of here. After that, I start shooting, and I don't generally miss." For a moment, it seemed like the bandits might actually consider his offer. But greed and pride are powerful motivators, and Scar Jake had too much invested in this robbery to walk away empty-handed. "Take him down, boys!" Scar Jake shouted, raising his rifle. What happened next took place in the space of a heartbeat. Cole's hands moved with lightning speed, drawing both pistols in a motion so fluid it seemed like magic. The canyon erupted with gunfire, the sound bouncing off the walls like a deadly symphony. When the smoke cleared, 4 of the bandits lay motionless on the canyon floor. Only Scar Jake remained standing, clutching his wounded shoulder and staring at Cole with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Jesus," Scar Jake whispered. "How did you—" "Practice," Cole replied simply, holstering his weapons. "Lots and lots of practice." Martha stared in amazement. The entire gunfight had lasted less than 5 seconds, yet Cole had managed to draw and fire with deadly accuracy, while the bandits were still raising their weapons. It was like watching a force of nature in action. "Please," Scar Jake begged, blood seeping through his fingers. "I give up. Don't kill me." Cole studied the wounded man for a long moment. "That woman and her children, they're under my protection now. You spread the word that anyone who bothers them will answer to me. Understood?" Scar Jake nodded frantically. "Understood. Won't happen again, I swear. See that it doesn't." Cole gestured toward the canyon entrance. "Now get on your horse and ride, and take your friends with you, the ones that are still breathing." As it turned out, 2 of the bandits were still alive but badly wounded. With Scar Jake's help, they managed to load the survivors onto horses and disappear into the desert, leaving behind only bloodstains and the memory of Cole Garrett's deadly skill. Martha climbed down from the wagon on shaking legs, still holding baby Emma. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to repay you." Cole retrieved his horse and walked over to the wagon. "No need for repayment, ma'am. What's your name?" "Martha Henderson. These are my children, Tommy, Sarah, and Emma." Cole tipped his hat. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Henderson. Where are you folks headed?" "California. My sister lives in Sacramento. She says there are opportunities there for a widow with children." Cole nodded thoughtfully. "That's a long journey through dangerous country. You planning to make it alone?" Martha's shoulders sagged. "I don't have much choice. My husband died in a mine collapse 6 months ago. We lost everything." "I see." "Gee." Cole was quiet for a moment, considering. "Well, Mrs. Henderson, it seems to me that traveling alone isn't working out too well for you. Mind if I ride along for a while? I'm heading west myself." Martha felt a surge of relief mixed with apprehension. Having Cole Garrett's protection would certainly make the journey safer, but she also knew he was a wanted man. Traveling with him could bring its own dangers. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Garrett, but I wouldn't want to put you in harm's way. I've heard that that there might be people looking for you." Cole's expression grew serious. "That's true enough, but the way I see it, Mrs. Henderson, you've got bigger problems than my reputation. This country's full of men like those bandits, and they won't all be scared off by a few stories." Tommy stepped forward, his young face set with determination. "Mister, are you really the Cole Garrett? The one who fought the Apache war chief Black Wolf?" Cole looked down at the boy with something approaching a smile. "That's one of the stories they tell, son. Though it wasn't much of a fight once Black Wolf and I got to talking." "Will you teach me to shoot like that?" Tommy asked, his eyes wide with admiration. "Tommy!" Martha scolded. "That's not appropriate." But Cole held up a hand. "It's all right, Mrs. Henderson. Your boy's got courage. That's something to be proud of. But son, being fast with a gun isn't something you want to learn unless you have to. It's a hard life, and it doesn't usually end well." As they talked, Martha studied Cole's face, looking for some sign of the cold-blooded killer she'd heard about in the stories. Instead, she saw a man who seemed tired, maybe even haunted by his past. There was kindness in his eyes when he looked at her children, and she found herself beginning to trust him. "If you're serious about riding with us," she said finally, "I'd be grateful for the protection. But I want your word that you won't bring trouble down on my children." Cole nodded solemnly. "You have my word, Mrs. Henderson. I'll see you safely to California or die trying." Dune, and so began one of the most unlikely partnerships in the history of the Old West. Martha Henderson, a widow trying to build a new life for her children, and Cole Garrett, a gunfighter running from his past, joined forces for the long journey to California. Over the following days, they settled into a routine. Cole would ride ahead to scout for dangers while Martha drove the wagon. In the evenings, they would make camp together, sharing meals and stories around the campfire. Cole proved to be surprisingly good with the children, teaching Tommy how to care for the horses and showing Sarah how to identify edible plants. As they traveled, Martha learned more about the man behind the legend. Cole had been born in Texas, the son of a Methodist preacher who'd been killed trying to protect his congregation from Comanche raiders. Cole had spent his youth seeking revenge, honing his skills with a gun until he became one of the fastest draws in the West. But somewhere along the way, the quest for justice had turned into something darker. Cole had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, making enemies of both outlaws and lawmen. Now, at 42, he was a man without a home, surviving on his reputation and his speed with a gun. "Why did you help us?" Martha asked one evening as they sat by the fire. The children were asleep in the wagon, and the desert stretched endlessly around them under a canopy of stars. Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "I guess because I saw something in you and your children that I thought was worth protecting. This country's got a way of crushing good people, and I've seen too much of that already. But you're risking your life for strangers. The law is looking for you, and traveling with us will slow you down." Cole looked at her across the fire, his blue eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "Martha, I've been running from the law for 10 years. Another few weeks won't make much difference. Besides, where am I running to? I've got no family, no home, no future worth speaking of. Maybe helping you and your children will be the first good thing I've done in a long time." Martha felt her heart stir with an emotion she hadn't experienced since her husband's death. There was something about Cole Garrett that called to her, not just his strength and protection, but the wounded soul she glimpsed beneath his tough exterior. Their journey continued westward through the blazing deserts of Arizona and into the mountains of California. Along the way, they faced numerous challenges: flash floods, rattlesnakes, and more bandits who thought a lone woman would be easy prey. But Cole's reputation preceded them, and word had spread about what had happened to Scar Jake's gang. Most troublemakers took one look at Cole Garrett and decided to find easier targets. Those who didn't quickly learned why he was considered one of the most dangerous men in the West. One particularly memorable encounter occurred near the Colorado River, where they met a group of Mexican bandits led by a man called El Serpiente. Unlike the cowardly thugs they'd faced before, these men were professional killers who weren't intimidated by Cole's reputation. The confrontation took place at dawn, with the sun rising over the desert like a ball of fire. El Serpiente and his men surrounded the camp, their weapons trained on Cole and Martha's family. "So," El Serpiente said, his accent thick with his native Spanish, "you are the famous Cole Garrett. I have heard much about you, senor. They say you are the fastest gun in the West." Cole stood slowly, his hands hovering near his pistols. "They say a lot of things. Most of them aren't true." El Serpiente laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Modest, I like that. But today, senor, your reputation dies with you. My men and I, we have a bet to settle. We want to see if the great Cole Garrett is as fast as the stories say." What followed was the most intense gunfight of Cole's career. El Serpiente's men were skilled fighters, veterans of countless battles along the Mexican border. But Cole had something they didn't. He was fighting not just for his own life, but for the lives of the woman and children he'd sworn to protect. The battle raged for nearly an hour, with Cole using every trick he'd learned in his years as a gunfighter. He used the terrain to his advantage, moving from rock to rock, picking off the bandits one by one. Martha and her children huddled in the wagon, listening to the gunfire and praying that Cole would survive. When the sun finally rose fully above the horizon, El Serpiente lay dead in the dust, and his surviving men had fled into the desert. Cole emerged from behind a boulder, wounded but alive, his clothes torn and his face grim. "Is it over?" Martha asked, her voice shaking. Cole nodded, reloading his pistols. "It's over, but word of this will spread. There'll be others looking to make a name for themselves by taking down Cole Garrett." Despite the dangers, their journey continued, and slowly, something beautiful began to grow between Martha and Cole. It started with small moments, a shared look across the campfire, a gentle touch when he helped her down from the wagon, the way he smiled when he watched her children playing. Martha had loved her husband deeply, but what she felt for Cole was different. It was born of shared hardship and mutual respect, tempered by the knowledge that every day together might be their last. Cole, for his part, began to see in Martha and her children the possibility of redemption, a chance to build something good from the ashes of his violent past. As they approached Sacramento, both of them knew that their time together was drawing to a close. Martha would be reunited with her sister and begin building a new life. Cole would have to move on, staying ahead of the law and the bounty hunters who pursued him. "What will you do when we reach California?" Martha asked one evening as they camped in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Cole stared up at the stars, his face thoughtful. "I don't rightly know. Keep moving, I suppose. It's what I've always done." "You could stay," Martha said quietly. "California's a big place. You could start over, maybe find a new name, a new life." Cole turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "And what kind of life would that be? Always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for someone to recognize me? That's no life for you and your children." "It would be better than being alone," Martha said, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole reached out and took her hand. "Martha, you deserve better than a man with blood on his hands and a price on his head. You deserve someone who can give you and your children a real future." But even as he spoke the words, Cole knew that leaving Martha and her children would be the hardest thing he'd ever done. They had become his family, the first real family he'd known since his father's death all those years ago. Their final night together was bittersweet. They made camp just outside Sacramento, knowing that tomorrow would bring their parting. The children sensed something was different and stayed close to Cole, as if trying to memorize every detail of his face. "Will we see you again?" Tommy asked, his young voice filled with hope. Cole knelt down to the boy's level. "I don't know, son. Life's funny that way, but I want you to promise me something. You take care of your mother and your sisters. Be the man of the family now." Tommy nodded solemnly. "I promise, Mr. Garrett." Sarah gave Cole a drawing she'd made of him on his horse, and even baby Emma seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, reaching out to touch his face with her tiny hands. As the sun rose over the Sacramento Valley, Cole prepared to leave. He'd already said his goodbyes to the children, and now only Martha remained. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face, "for everything. You saved our lives." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "No, Martha, you saved mine. You and your children gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, hope." They kissed then, a gentle kiss filled with love and regret and the bitter knowledge that it might be their last. When they finally parted, Cole mounted his horse and rode away without looking back, knowing that if he did, he might never be able to leave. Martha stood watching until he disappeared over the horizon. then turned to face her new life in California. She had no idea that Cole Garrett would become a legend, not just for his skill with a gun, but for the day he chose to save a widow and her children instead of riding past their troubles. As for Cole, he rode north into the mountains, carrying with him the memory of a woman's love and the knowledge that he had finally done something truly good with his life. The law might still be hunting him, but he was no longer running from himself. What did you think of this tale of redemption and sacrifice in the Old West? Do you believe Cole Garrett made the right choice in walking away from the chance at a new life with Martha and her children, or should he have stayed and fought for their future together? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on this classic tale of love, honor, and the price of redemption.